Hey folks, Dr. D here with Module 1 of the Music Audio Production course. We're talking about recording studios and kind of the basic layout and overview of the facilities we have here at Front Range Community College. So we'll go ahead and get started. We're located right here in what's called our main studio room, and this is sort of where we house a lot of the instruments and our microphones and cables and stands and all the infrastructure that one would have in any general basic recording studio. Okay, now we are in the control room, and this is adjacent to both the studio room we just saw, as well as a isolation booth / practice room. There's also 2 additional practice rooms which can be used for isolation of instruments. There's no line of sight through those rooms, but they are connected through a patch bay. So our layout of the studio has 3 isolated small rooms, one of which has glass for line of sight. They all are connected with patch bay, so there's microphone inputs as well as line inputs in the patch bays on those 3 small rooms. There's 3 patch bays into the main studio room, and then behind the wall there is a performing arts studio, which we'll show you in a second, that has 2 patch bays, and it's a very large room. It's like a black box theater with sound curtains, which can be drawn to give more of like a reverb ambient room sound, or it can be shut to make it a little bit more of a dead room. But in the control room, we've got the computer running all of our DAWs. We have a controller, a mixing board controller, that has motorized faders that can be used to control whatever DAW we are using. You can use these motorized faders in conjunction with the software. Next to it we have this is a rack that houses most of our interfaces. The interface connects directly into the computer through a digital cable, usually either a USB or some sort of FireWire cable. But these are the microphone preamps, and they're all basically chained together. So one of these interfaces kind of functions as the master interface, which clocks into the computer, and then you can chain additional collections of preamps and additional interfaces through that. Our main patch bay, and this is kind of like the epicenter of lines that run in between all of the patch bays in these different rooms. We have the recording studio, performing arts studio, and control room all labeled. They're different modules, and the mic inputs are all labeled for each of those rooms. As you go down to the bottom half, there's the private instruction rooms. They each have 3 microphone connections as well as 1 line connection to each of those rooms. There's a intercom patching portion of the patch bay, and that's when you're going to take signal from the control room and pipe it out into one of the other rooms. Like if you're doing some sort of talkback and the engineer wants to be able to communicate through an intercom of some sort, you can have a microphone in this room that outputs into the other rooms in the studio. So all of the lines on a portion at the bottom here, this module has all of the line inputs. So for routing headphone mixes using TRS or 1/4-inch cables for instruments, you have those, and those are bidirectional, meaning that you can send signal from the control room out into the studio, or you can run signal from the studio room into the control room. We have our XLR cables all neatly wrapped and hung on these little shelf hangers. We have a collection of dynamic microphones that live in this box here. We have our microphone clips living in another box, and a couple other boxes that have random things like windscreens and whatnot. Above and around the XLR cables, we have some shorter XLR cables for patching various things. We have collections of headphone monitors. We have kind of specialty cables, various TRS split to TS cables for routing headphone mixes, some tape, some markers. Over here on the left side we have our TRS cables, our balanced quarter-inch TRS cables that can function as stereo headphone cables or can function as balanced line connections. We have instrument cables, or also known as TS cables, located on the left side, as well as some TRS headphone extender cables up on the upper hanger on the back. We have extension cords here in one box. We also have some power cables for many of the devices that require a 3-prong power cable, as well as some additional power strips. We also have a cable snake, which is very useful for live audio situations as well as studio recording situations where you might want to save the trouble of routing cables and XLR cables all across the floor. You can use a cable snake and patch that into a patch bay and have all the microphones and the cables very close to the drum set, say, and kind of helps some of your organization, keeping some of the floor space open as well. So all these things are labeled. Up on the top shelf we have several headphone mixers, as well as DI boxes, direct insertion or input boxes, as well as some windscreens or popper stoppers that are very useful when recording voices and different dialogue to reduce the pops from hard consonants, as well as many of the shock mounts for the certain microphones. So the etiquette is to keep things organized. When you take things out, you neatly assemble them and how you're going to use them, and then you properly wrap your cables using the over-under wrap method and return everything to its rightful place. And it helps out the person that comes in after you and the next engineer. Another really important tool in the recording studio is the mic stands. So in this cabinet we have our microphone stands. So they make a range of sizes and shapes of stands, starting with some of the smallest stands, some of your just basic straight stand. Some taller small stands will have a boom connected as well. There's several different versions of these. As we get to a taller one, basically we still have the center telescoping portion, but it has a 3-leg tripod on the bottom with a boom arm, and then this has a double telescoping boom arm on the top. And then as we get to a taller stand, it's basically the same version of that, but a little bit taller. This is something that would work for a vocal mic or even a drum overhead or some sort of instrument mic that gets a little bit taller. In addition to the standard short, medium, and taller boom stands, we have these larger stands that are really useful for maybe doing vocal tracks with a very nice heavy condenser mic. You might want to put it on a sturdy stand like this, or if you're doing drum overheads or some sort of microphone that's going to be hanging a little bit higher up into the ceiling area. These are a little bit more heavy duty and useful for drum overheads and applications where you want to get a room microphone up in the air. One of the things I want to point out about these stands here is how you handle these is there's kind of an art to it. So when you are grabbing the stand out of the cabinet, the base of it with the tripod is adjustable. When you take it out, you want to extend the base of the stand all the way to the bottom and then give it a little bit of a tighten there and make sure it's not loose or sliding down to the floor, kind of like what happens there. You want it to be a tripod, not a tripod with a weird fourth leg in the middle. The center portion, these are often plastic tightening sleeves here, and if you over tighten this is really easy to strip and break. So you want to tighten it just to the point to where it won't fall down. Same deal with the boom arm top. It will screw onto the top of the center pole These oftentimes get loose, and these are all wobbly, so you kind of want to make sure that that's kind of good and tight there, and there's no, you know, creaky looseness going on amongst this joint right here. The boom arm can rotate, and there is a little lever here, which has a couple rubber washers in between this joint here. This is another thing that people often over tighten. You want these to be tightened to the point to where the microphone does not fall over, but not to the point to where you are cinching this down incredibly tight. You can easily strip that or whatnot. Another thing that's nice to do is tighten it just to the point to where the microphone is stable and not sagging or falling over, but also it's loose enough that you can make fine-tuned adjustments like that. So there's kind of a sweet spot in there with this. The telescoping top part of the boom arm often has two different telescoping portions. One of the tricks when you're attaching a mic clip to the end of the boom arm is to, rather than twist the mic clip over and over again or with the mic on it, the best way to do that is to loosen one of the screws here so that the top portion of the boom arm is able to rotate like that, and then you can put your mic clip and thread that on the top there like that. Ready, tighty, lefty, loosey, and spin that nice and tight quickly, and then lock it down. Okay. So the main thing is to not over tighten these stands and try not to break them. There's all kinds of wobbly points in here where you might need to tighten that down, just kind of check the thing and make sure it's not all shaky and weird. When you're putting these things back in the cabinet, it's pretty much just things in the opposite direction. You're going to remove the mic clip, because we keep our mic clips separately in a box in the cabinet, so that when you're using different microphones that might use various mic clips, you don't have to undo someone else's work. You're basically going to collapse the center portion of the stand. You're going to adjust the boom arm so it's kind of compact and up and down. And then when you bring the base back up, what I like to do, since our microphones sit upright in a cabinet, you raise up the base to the point to where that center pole is above the rubber feet of the boom arm tripod. And that way when you set it back into the cabinet, the rubber feet grip the ground and it doesn't slide out and fall on you. Cables and connections. We'll start with 1/4 inch World, and we'll begin with a instrument cable. This is what you would plug into your guitar or bass or maybe keyboard. And this is an unbalanced 1/4 inch cable. It's going to have basically two connection points. There's the tip and the sleeve. One will be the actual signal and one will be a ground. The next one up from that will be a TRS cable. If you notice, the TRS cable has a tip, ring, and a sleeve. But there's one wire or two wires that have a signal going through them, and one's reverse polarity so that it is noise canceling, and then there's a ground. These are often used for either balanced line inputs or outputs coming out of different devices, or this could also be a stereo headphone cable. So these will be used in a patch bay to route into a headphone mixer, because you're going to have a left and right channel as well as a ground. A pair of headphones here, and you can see it's got the TRS tip ring sleeve 1/4 inch. A lot of these headphones are kind of also go between a 1/8 inch TRS, and a lot of them have these little adapters, so depending on the input jack size on your interface or device, whether it's a phone or a computer or an interface, you can use these little adapters to connect that. Another cable that's heavily used in a studio, project studio, will be a TRS extender, and literally this is just like an extension to a normal microphone cable. So if you're kind of short on length, you can use one of these cables to extend your headphones another 10 or 20 feet. TRS split to TS cable. Coming out of the back of a lot of interfaces, you have stereo or you have mono outputs. You have like outputs 1 through 8 on most 8-channel interfaces. And what you can do is you can have the left and right mono summed into a stereo. And when you're doing headphone monitoring, You might come out of the back of your interface with output 1 and 2, which converts it to a stereo, and then you can go into some sort of patch bay and then come out on the other side of the wall with a TRS cable that will travel into either directly into your headphones or can travel into a headphone mixer. So TRS cables are not only used for headphone stereo situations, but they're also a balanced line. Okay, so another kind of hybrid between the two worlds is a TRS quarter-inch to some sort of XLR. Okay, because TRS has 3 different connection points, 3 different wires, and so does a microphone cable. This is a TRS to female XLR. These aren't as useful in a lot of situations, but you could use this, say, if you're plugging a microphone into a guitar amp. But more useful is the TRS to male XLR. Now, this is what most of your recording interface stereo outputs use to go into a powered speaker monitor. So if you look on the back of a lot of speakers, you could have, you know, a quarter-inch line, or you can have XLR input. So this is really useful because most interfaces, their output, their left and right monitor output channels. XLR cables have 3 connection points. The male end is the end that has the 3 prongs, and this is always the direction of the signal. So this is going to be what plugs into your microphone. On the back of your microphone there will be 3 prongs, so the signal is going out of the microphone, it's going into the female end of the XLR, and then it follows the direction of the male end, and this can be plugged into your microphone preamp or into a patch bay, into a snake, whatever you're doing. With XLR cables you have 3 connection points. There's 3 wires, 2 signal wires, as well as a insulated sleeve. So you have like plus and negative, and then a ground, which is basically a metal shield on the out exterior part, which makes it much less prone to interference. And the great thing about mic cables is they're very low voltage signal. They're the least powerful signal, and because there's less voltage going through this wire, it has the least amount of resistance. So you can have a XLR cable that goes 100 feet without losing a lot of signal, whereas an instrument cable or a line cable have a lot more voltage going through them, and the longer the cable, the more interference, the more resistance that you're going to encounter.